All right, this is Tripathi with Digital Sparx Marketing, and with us we have a great guest today, Michelle Stinson Ross with Apogee Results. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. I mean, I know you talk a lot about psychology, marketing, things like that.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us what do you mean by that?
Well, marketing is inherently a form of communication, right?
Right.
Communication happens to be inherently human.
Right.
And yet, because of the mediation of technology, we've gotten kind of mired in keeping track of what Google bots track and looking at data points and all of this kind of stuff. And we sometimes forget that those data points actually represent human behavior.
Okay.
And the way you stimulate human behavior is with the psychological aspect of communication in and of itself, right? So to be successful, especially in digital marketing, there are a lot of aspects of just human communication that we have to go way back to the beginning of and make sure that we're connecting with that at a psychological level in order to have digital marketing success.
So can you break down, like if I were to start on this psychological factors and looking at humans and then basically targeting through that prism, how would you go about it? Is there any 7 factors, 5 factors?
I don't know that there's any particular number of factors, but all right, let's think about this. So one of the things that we as marketers tend to want to track is conversion rate optimization, right? Well, psychologically, did the page that that person landed on, did it match the message that brought them there?
Yeah.
Did the page serve the purpose that the user was there for? All of those things that factor into how successfully we convert a page visitor into a lead or whatever, get them to fill in that form or click that button or whatever, those are psychological things.
Okay.
Also in social media marketing, did we get somebody to watch a video? Did we get somebody to click through on a social post? Did we get somebody to hit the smiley face?
Yeah.
All of those forms of communication that get that communication ball rolling, those are all psychological.
Right, right. So psychology plays a huge part.
It does.
And I think I read a study by this researcher from Stanford that how we have psychological triggers, so how something triggers a certain behavior and then we take action on it.
Right.
And you mentioned social media. What are some of the other areas where we see this in play day in, day out? If you can think of any examples.
Well, one of the things that I think about is, so in the media and in the space of public discourse about, say, social media marketing and social media in general, we've talked a lot about how social media can be misused, right? Same thing. So what if we're not careful about the psychology and we're either being abusive in some way, shape, or form? So a lot of the moral implications of our marketing messages also stem from that psychology. Are we really pushing the buttons on, say, race or gender or any number of hot and button issues? Are we pushing those buttons a little too hard sometimes? So being able to hold ourselves accountable to do no harm in the public space is also a psychological aspect, particularly of social media marketing.
Nice. I think one thing, and you talk a lot about this, is you have psychological factors and then you have storytelling.
Right.
So how does storytelling, or how can you take the psychology of humans and then build it into storytelling?
So storytelling is key, and it stems from our basic humanity, regardless of language, regardless of culture, regardless of age or anything else. We as human beings have always, ever since communication was a part of what we do, we have always told stories. It is how we connect with one another. We learn how to be empathetic to one another through storytelling. The ability to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes is done through storytelling. So in order to garner that emotional connection to a brand, we have to be able to tell a story around a brand.
Right. So when you talk about storytelling, I think the first thing is on the content side of things, I see a lot of people creating tons of content. How much of the storytelling plays a part of, let's say you're creating an ebook or a webinar or content pieces like that?
Certainly.
Right?
Well, think about it. Written content is only one form of content.
Right.
We can tell stories verbally, so we could be, this video
Right.
is a form of content. And the story, the narrative that we have through the course of our conversation is a part of that content. Maybe we decide to turn this video content into podcast content, right? Where it's audio. Still, this engagement, the storytelling aspect that we have in the course of our conversation becomes a part of the content itself. How we then present that to further the story along. Maybe this is a series of stories that relates one to another, to another, to another.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I see that a lot. We run a small podcast, and what we see is when somebody listens to one podcast episode, they consume all the different episodes.
Right.
And that's a classic form of story, right? I mean, so my question to you is, when marketers start out and you don't have this approach of creating content or looking at your marketing through a storytelling prism, how should they go about it? Creative briefs, like what?
Creatively, I honestly, storytelling and engaging storytelling actually helps a lot with not so much promoting the brand or the product or the service, because sure, we can talk about those things all day long, but does another human being actually connect with that aspect?
Right.
As soon as we start engaging a bit of storytelling to tell how a particular client had a problem, and then they started using a particular service, and how that service helped solve the problem and make that client, that customer, that whatever, now we're actually telling a story. We're starting with its plot, right? We have a character, they get involved in a situation, and somehow that situation is resolved. That's classic storytelling. And as soon as we kind of get our focus off of our brand or our product or whatever and into the story of how a particular customer or how a particular potential customer can succeed and make themselves a little bit better and basically go on that hero's journey with our product, then we're engaging in storytelling.
So, there's a lot of effort in there, right? Because it's not a classic straight cookie cutter creation type. But when you're doing storytelling, there's a lot of strategic planning involved. So how would you measure those impact of that storytelling type of or form of content? And so you build a bigger case in the organization. What are some of the metrics people should be measuring?
Honestly, I think audience acquisition continues to be the one metric that kind of gets ignored. So whether we're talking about content marketing or we're talking about influencer marketing, because you probably have to have content in order to even have influencer marketing. A lot of times people are advised, you need to track your brand awareness. Well, what does that mean? Technically, audience acquisition is the thing that you measure. So you're looking at the growth of an email list based on how they converted around a story tied to a landing page, right? Or we're looking at how the Google remarketing pixel picked up somebody that we can continue to engage with until they come back and convert. Same thing with the social media pixels.
Nice. So then audience acquisition is the core, the main objective, things like that.
And story can drive audience acquisition. When you look at how video views can drive a retargeting audience in Facebook, you start the audience acquisition process with storytelling and you continue to take them along that journey with subsequent stories.
Now, are there any examples that come off your mind that are good storytelling examples? Can you think of any right now? I know, sorry to put you in a spot.
Well, okay, so I go back to, I came to marketing as a writer, as a storyteller anyway. So again, that classic plot. Character has a situation. Character gets involved in, trying to fix the situation. And what is the resolution, right? So that same 3-point arc is the basis of any kind of storytelling. And usually when you follow that classic model, you can find a way around your product, your service, your whatever, in order to begin to engage that story.
Nice.
And the best stories usually follow that model.
Nice. Perfect. Is there anything that bugs you or bothers you these days when it comes to the whole storytelling, content, acquisition marketing, that you think that stop doing this, do this instead?
I wouldn't say so much as aggravate as, wow, you just told a great story in a particular format. Why aren't you using that in all of the other formats available to you? Once you've got that great story, make sure that you're telling it in all of the possible ways that you could tell it.
Right.
Because storytelling also engages like semantic language, all of the other terminology that relates back to whatever the particular topic of that story was. So make sure that you're doing it in video, that you're doing it in visual, that you're doing it in audio, that you're doing it in written form.
Nice, great. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to share probably that you can think of?
Other than, oh, guess what? Your SEO impacts your social media impacts your content marketing. Look at the entire digital ecosystem and not just one particular discipline at a time.
Right, so have a holistic approach to digital.
Exactly, because that's how your customers are looking at you.
Yeah, and that's what we call it. Don't be tactic happy, but look at the holistic way of it.
Right.
But so Michelle, if our audience wants to reach you, how do they do that?
Honestly, the best way to reach me is Michelle at apogeeresults.com. So I'll spell that one for you, Apogee, Apogee Results.com. Obviously, you can visit our website, you can email me, Michelle Stinson Ross, and absolutely every social media platform you can think of will get you to me as well.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you, Michelle, for joining. Thank you for your time. Great
My pleasure.
Chatting with you. And that's it, folks. Hope you learned some great nuggets about human psychology and storytelling from Michelle. So thank you for joining.